Apologies to everyone who's not read Gulliver's Travels. I need to stay around here, don't I? That you might not get this joke. This might also sound controversial or divisive to some of you as well. I'm a bit of a stickler when it comes to licensing. And in Gulliver's Travels, two countries or areas go to war over what appears to be quite a small and slight difference. So I decided when I was going to make the presentation, and this is also the basis for those of you that won't be in Crete, of my video presentation for Crete, or for the Semantic Web Conference over there. So I like to humiliate myself as well. So there's a picture of me as Jonathan Swift, or Jonathan Sift in this case. So as a brief background, UK OER, which is the OK Education Resources Stream, which was funded by JISC, ran for about 5 years, I think. It stopped about a year and a half ago when we had a recession. And up until then, basically there were various phases, and one of those phases I built at the University of Nottingham with my colleagues there, helped develop something called Expert, which was a large educational search engine. The thing that it didn't do though was it was stuff that was on the web. So in one sense it was open because it was stuff that had been indexed, stuff that was being provided publicly, but it wasn't necessarily open in the classic definition of OERs, or if it's a classic definition. I think if you go to the Creative Commons webpage, there are 7 different definitions of OER, but the one thing that they have in common is they all mention the word license, and not all of the content that was in Expert is openly licensed. So that led to the creation of Solvonauts. This is Lilliput, to continue kicking this metaphor dead, but I have renamed it OpenPut. And the two rival islands, I'm glad people are laughing, I take that it's with me and not at me, though I'm happy for you to miss, yes. I don't want to be presumptuous in what you're finding funny. Yes, so the idea being, how would Solvonauts be different from the island of Solvonauts? So how would we were both talking about openness, we seem to be going for the same things, we seem to be talking about the same type of development. What are the differences between the two areas? So that's just me doing random flags. Ooh, come on. So, crudely speaking, Solvonauts, if I back up actually, because I'll be in the PDF. So it's solvonauts.org. The construction of the word Solvonauts comes from Solvo. I went back to Latin, being the oldest language I could think of finding, and went through the different words in Latin that had some derivation, or in some way went forward to open, so somewhere within their definition, in the translation at least, there was the word open. And the one that I liked the most was Solvo, as in resolve and solution and so forth, and then just attach noughts to the end because it meant I could do a good logo. Because in a way it was a conscious step away from where open was, because I think in terms of open education, and you get different questions about this and different concepts about this, but we kind of ignored the fact that licensing was important. So there was a period last year when I was developing a lot of open educational resources. I only wanted to use licensed materials. I only wanted to use stuff that I felt safe in terms of due diligence and in terms of being able to use it without worrying about it going away or someone complaining about it, or copyright issues. And all of the search engines that I could find, and that's Merlot, that's OER Commons, and Expert, Jorum's okay if you're a UK OER person, weren't openly licensed. So I started to build something else, and I wanted it explicitly to be different. And the different thing is, effectively, with Solvonauts, as against Solvosum, is that in Solvonauts, everything within there is openly licensed. So everything in there will either have a Creative Commons license, or will be public domain, or, as Flickr builds it, no known copyright restrictions. But I wanted to take it further than that. I think there's an argument with an openness that you should be aspirational in some sense. So all of the Solvonauts code is open source, it's on GitHub, it's openly licensed. In theory, every part of the code is a module. There's 2 files which are core code, so you can change its functionality, you can do pretty much what you want to it. You can break it, you can add new things, and you can take things out. In terms of the data, also in the GitHub, there are dumps on how we've, on the SQL that we use, there are dumps on the sites that we get data from. There's data on how the resources are being used. For those of you that have never come across the term Paradata, Paradata is something that has come out of an American project called the Learning Registry, where the idea that's about usage tracking of resources. So if you look into the GitHub, there are also files to show which are the search terms that are used the most, which are the links that are used the most. And also extending the idea of OER. Within OER, David Wiley, who's one of the leading people in the OER scene, definitely in the United States anyway, has a concept of 5 Rs, and those are remix, redistribute, reuse, reclaim, and I think repurpose, but I forget. And the idea being that as a search engine, Solvonauts acts like an OER does. It acts as if it is open, because you can change the code, you can get at the data, you can reuse it, you can host your own. It runs off Apache MySQL and PS, like doesn't even have to run off MySQL. It runs off Apache, probably not even that, runs off PHP. So you can reuse it, you can rebuild it, and the goal is to make something effectively as simple as something like WordPress to use, hopefully so. And you compare that to the other ones, you'll find that they're openly licensed some of the time. You'll find the odd one will be open source, but in terms of duplicating it, in terms of sustainability, if I was to be hit by a bus, all of the code and all of the data and everything that builds the site is there for you to use, or would be there for somebody else to reuse. I'm not funded, I don't make any money out of this, I'm losing money by being here effectively, so I'll be passing around a tip jar in a bit. And so the key thing for me was, and the goal for this, is that basically it's about making it as open as it is possible to be, in as many ways in which you can take openness to mean something. And it's not just in this sense, but carrying on from this, that it's not just about being open in terms of the content, it's also providing services. So amongst some of the site's modules, there are various APIs, you can query it. Thinking back to the first presentation that we've had today, there's a Chrome plugin that we've got which you can install as a browser thing, and when you've done a Google search, you can click on that button and it will go through all of the URLs that Google search has returned, and if it finds any licensing information in Solvonauts for those URLs, it will show you a little symbol. So if you've done a Google search but you are explicitly looking for OER, you can find that and it will show you that metadata. In terms of plugins, we've got a WordPress plugin and we've got a Moodle repository plugin. Then the bottom two things, we've got the Twitter account, which is Solvonauts, and every hour or so that will tweet one OER at random. And then on a similar theme, we've got Solvogram, which is a bad play on words, but you'll be used to that by now. And what that does is that tweets, once an hour, that tweets a picture. So we've got a lot of content from Flickr, and using the Open Graph and the Twitter cards, we've taken those features and we started to broadcasting OER out there. So rather than just basically saying we're a big place like a repository and we're just a shelf and you can just put OER on us and nothing will happen, we're proactively trying to get content out there. The middle line needs to be better, just to play on words, it sounded good when I wrote it, and the idea is that we don't want to think of it as a finished product. We don't want to think of it as something that won't change. We're looking to think of ways that we can do stuff and how we can improve things. The last bit of code that I committed before the Open Courseware conference a couple of weeks ago, and what that does in terms of something else that's come up today in terms of localization and contextualization, that when it harvests the metadata from the various places that it gets it, you can look through that metadata and can start to apply translations. Do you want an action picture? Entirely natural. I'll be more serious in a bit. Yeah, so the idea being that one of the problems that we have in any of this is, again, going back to this, in terms of the distribution of OER production, the vast majority of OER production is pretty much MIT. In that most of OER is probably coming out of there. There are pockets elsewhere. There are countries that did very well and then seem to have dried up to a certain extent. Spain would be one example. And the problem with this is a lot of this is very localized. A lot of it is obviously very text heavy. Learning objects tend to be. And so getting that metadata into something else so you could break it down and maybe find pictures and so on is very hard to do. So in theory now, I don't know any other languages, so I can't do this, but I've tested it out briefly, and when it harvests, you can basically start to augment the metadata within another language. So the code's fully internationalized, so should you, say, want to run an OER repository or version of this in another language, but start to basically improve the results, you could then start to translate word through. One of the modules that's there is a module that goes through all of the metadata that's been provided and tells you the most common terms. So if you wanted to start doing the translations, you could do it that way. I'm guessing that's about 10 minutes, and I think that's the last one.
Brilliant.
Do you want a picture now?
No more pictures.
No. No flash.
Okay. Maybe later.
Yeah.
Is there any questions for Pat?